If your business sends or receives money globally, you already know exchange rates make a big impact. I'm Rachel, a local OF expert, and I help Aussie businesses make international payments when they need to, with bank-beating FX rates.
Small things can make a big difference, like being able to talk to a real currency expert who really helps. Get an OF expert working for you. ofx.com/save. Consider the PDS. OFX, moving money globally.
We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which this podcast is recorded. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and to Aboriginal elders emerging. The following podcast contains accounts of child assault of a graphic, violent nature. Listener discretion is advised.
So I think what happened then is he gets home and he finds the pig's head there and realises this is his big out. Like, this is better than his first plan.
Today's story comes to you from a town called Moe in Victoria's Latrobe Valley. We've spoken at length in previous episodes about the challenges faced by the communities in the valley. The main issues at play are related to the electricity industry, which was privatised in the 1990s. It was the main source of employment in the valley and has never been replaced with anything else. Residents are still impacted by negative health outcomes related to the thermal power stations in the area, though. They're exposed to high levels of pollution from open-cut coal mines, for example. The Department of Health reports a lower life expectancy for males born in the area than the Australian average, and at school entry, over 15% of children in the valley are developmentally delayed. Belinda Murphy was a 21-year-old single mother of two in 1997. The father of both of Belinda's children was living in Perth, but he was still legally married to her sister Katie. Whatever negative impact that had on their relationship was over by June 14th, when the two sisters pooled their resources so they could hit the town for a rare night out. The Latrobe Valley is small enough that you can catch a taxi from town to town. And on that Saturday night, the plan was for the sisters to travel to a party in Traralgon and then on to a pub there. Katie had two children of her own, so she'd organised a babysitter to stay at her house and watch over all four cousins. Earlier in the day, Belinda's new boyfriend, Greg Damasevich, called and offered to have her youngest, a 14-month-old little boy called Jaden, to his house for a couple of hours in the afternoon so she could get ready in peace. Belinda readily agreed because he'd successfully babysat Jaden before. She packed a shopping bag with nappies and clothes and anything else she thought they might need. And Greg came over around midday, picked them all up and dropped Belinda and her daughter at Katie's house and then continued on with Jaden. The plan was for him to deliver Jaden back to Katie's later in the afternoon. Before they left, Belinda called Greg around 4 p.m. because it had grown cold and she was worried she hadn't sent warm enough clothes for Jaden. Greg said not to worry. He was just about to give him a shower and drop him around at Katie's.
This is Australian True Crime with Michelle Laurie and Emily Webb. Come with us as we go beyond the news cycle to find out how people become killers, how people become victims, and what happens next.
As the young women headed out for the night, all around them the valley was doing what it does. And in Melbourne, veteran journalist Michael Gleeson was doing what he does, which I thought was always sports journalism. That's what he's famous for now. So I had to start the conversation by asking him how a sports guy ends up writing a book like the Jaidyn Leskie murder.
Oh, the simple answer is I wasn't a sports writer then. I was a crime writer, and I ended up in sport because partly because I spent a couple of years on the Jaidyn Leskie case, and I'd spent a few years writing about crime and misery, and really in the end I just thought, do I want to have my life surrounded by that? And you go to sport, which has always been a passion, but sport where a bad day is someone does a knee. And what I found in crime was that someone's worst day was your best day, because you actually got something good to write about. And that was just an awful feeling, that you were sort of excited when there was news come through that there was a murder or something like that. And it's awful, but that is what you are reporting on. And so the sort of weirder case became more compelling. But the other side of that is that they are incredibly compelling stories. They are human stories. And the thing about this, so to explain how I ended up being there and doing it, I was actually a crime writer at the time for the Herald Sun, and I had a tip-off that there were these drug raids that were going to happen all through sort of Gippsland, South Gippsland. And so myself and a photographer, Daryl Gregory, headed down there on the Saturday night, knowing that these raids were going to happen Sunday morning. The raids did happen. They didn't catch anyone. For some reason, someone was tipped off or whatever. But when I was down there, then one of the coppers said, yeah, you might want to head to Moe. There's a kid missing, and, yeah, there's a pig's head in the front yard. I was like, that sounds like a story. So we headed there and, lived there for the next month, really.
I think you are the first person I've ever met who really did leave crime reporting. Like everyone talks about that, I think, and everyone talks about having breaks and mental health breaks and then I go home and read about something else. But I think you're the first person I've ever met who really did walk away and stay away. Like, that's a long time now. Yeah. You never went back?
Well, I cover sports, so I haven't completely walked away.
No, but you walked away from crime. You really meant it.
That's what I mean. I haven't really walked away from crime covering sport.
There's a lot of drama in sport. There's a lot of correlation, isn't there, with sport and crime? It's sort of just only because of the human passion and drama.
Yeah, and in recent years there's the other thing, and look, I don't always be facetious, but the other thing is that, criminals are actually attracted to footballers, and
yes,
they are attracted to the money and the celebrity, and footballers are risk-taking personalities. They're also sort of attracted to nightclubs and the guys that are hanging around there with the money and splashing the cash, and so there is a crossover.
Yeah, we had Susanna Lopez on not long ago who's just written a book about that. And I was kind of peripherally aware of the connections, but when you really sit with her and she talks you through the number of cases where sportsmen find themselves caught up in crime, it's extraordinary, isn't it?
Oh, and you look at the match fixing overseas.
Yeah.
That's where it comes from, the nightclubs, and it's flick them drink cards, and then it's money, and then they're asking for tips on what's going to happen with the pitch and what's going to happen this, and so it circulates.
Oh, and listen to Andrea Rule's podcast about the racing industry. That blew my mind because I don't know anything about horse racing, right? I was like, wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So the month in Moe, again, something I did not know about. I'm from Queensland, not long in Melbourne. When this story happened, I did not know anything about the Latrobe Valley. Did you know much about the valley at the time?
I did. My family had come from Warrigal, which is just outside the valley. My father had grown up there, so I had been and spent time down there with grandparents and that. But Moe's just sort of that bit further on into the valley. And look, having written news and that sort of thing through that, you were aware through the Kennett period that there'd been the privatisation of the electricity and industry, and particularly down there. So it just meant that it was incredibly hard hit economically. The number of houses that were empty. There was an area down there, they call it the Bronx in Moe, and basically they were old SEC houses that had been abandoned because the workers had been laid off and they'd left town. You could go there and buy a house at that stage for under $30,000. You had a lot of socially marginal people collected in one area and economically disadvantaged. But the story of itself could have been really simple. It sort of peeled back the blinds to this whole world and life that was down there, and this sort of culture, subculture there, that you just don't really either know about or care to know about. And it was the most sort of riveting element to it.
It was always like a punchline, wasn't it, Moe, about mockies and
moccasins on everyone. Yeah.
It became a real character in this story too, because people in the suburbs were really shocked at how people were living. And especially I recall all that talk about how could she leave her baby and go out drunk? How irresponsible. But, yeah, I just remember that kind of overtook a lot of, as we've said, the fact that a baby was missing.
The first thing that people connected to is, okay, they've all got sort of weird spelling names. There's Belinda, Bilynda, and that's because her mum wanted a boy called Billy.
Well before the zeitgeist, may I
Yes.
say. And I say the same for myself. I changed the spelling of my name in Year 9 geography, which would have been about 1987.
Right.
Well before the zeitgeist.
Yes.
Trailblazer.
Yeah, traveller. But even the spelling of these names was well before it was fashionable. So in those days, everyone very quick to jump on and go, "Who are these people?"
Yeah, yeah.
And it was part of the negativity around the story. And very quickly, the victim in this case was lost.
That's absolutely true. And he was lost throughout. Like,
Yeah.
from day one, it was about the pig's head, and it was about Kenny Penfold and these guys that threw the pig's head, and then it was about the fact that Jaden's mum is also his aunt, and his dad's also his uncle. So, because his dad remained married to Katie when having children with her sister. So, that became sort of hard to get your head around, and it sort of raised the idea of what's going on down there.
So as you said, we find out, okay, there's a child missing, but there's a pig's head on the lawn. But then very early on, police say, we don't think they're related. And the rest of the country's going, what do you mean? How can
it not be?
Two things happen in one night in one house? So talk us through how then it unfolded from your perspective. You're a journalist who finds out, what do you mean they're not related? How do you report that to us? How are you finding out day by day from there?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, fundamentally, that point of that hurdle, that mental hurdle to get over of saying this was not connected, was one that the jury couldn't clear. And that fundamentally it always raised that issue of doubt through the entire case. It's like, you can't tell me that isn't connected. How is it so coincidental that a baby's left behind in the house, a pig's head's thrown at it, the baby disappears, it dies, and it's not connected? I mean, what world are we living in? No, there's too much doubt there. So, to backtrack to your question, we arrived on the morning and, there's a kid missing, baby missing, and the mum had been off in Traralgon. Belinda had been out at a party at Ryan's Hotel with her sister. They are not social drinkers. They are drink to get drunk party girls. When you get out, when you get the reins are released, you go hell for leather, and it often ends in a fight and quite drunk, kicked out of the pub. And that's sort of what happened on this night. So she was out. The baby was left with Greg. Greg's her boyfriend at this stage. Greg was a weird guy, but all of them are sort of weird in an adolescent, stunted maturity sort of way. They're all stuck as 15-year-olds playing pranks at high school, but in their 20s. And like, he used to keep a bucket of fish heads and guts in it, like one of those builder's plastic things, and he'd keep it in that for his enemies. So what he would do is, if he wanted a prank, he'd get a syringe full of that fish guts and inject it into like an air conditioning pipe, so that it then blasts through your house and you couldn't get the stink out, which is quite an inventive sort of prank, and a malicious one. The father of Belinda's child, Brett, is living over in WA. Her daughter, Brianna, that day was being looked after along with her sister Katie's kids at Katie's house. That was where Jaden was supposed to go at some stage during the afternoon, is to be dropped over with the babysitter there.
My understanding was that the reason that Belinda left Jaden with Greg was that Jaden liked cars. Was that part of it? And that Greg even said, leave him with me. He's fun. He likes being with me, and I'm going to work on the car, and he's a boy, and we'll do car stuff. There was a lot of that. It was more so from Greg saying, little man, make a man of him. Sort of, he needs to be around cars, and he liked having him around and someone to muck around with. So that was why. And he was comfortable there, and he stayed. And she dropped him there with a plastic bag full of, some clothes and nappies, and he stayed there. But what always struck me as well, there was this desire to look after the kid, but not actually care for him. Like, during the day, they didn't eat. He admitted afterwards, he sort of had maybe some chips and Coke. He's a 13-and-a-half-month-old baby. Like, it's not the diet of champions.
You forget how young he is. That's when you said how old he was. I'd forgotten actually how young.
Yeah, he literally was a toddler. Yes, there's a pig's head there on the lawn, and the police said pretty quickly it wasn't connected. And the reason being, they got to the house and said, well, the back door was bolted from the inside. No one ever questioned that had ever been unbolted. The window that the pig's head hit, if you could imagine your regular window, the pig's head hits the middle of the window, it smashes it, but all the glass at the bottom of the window is still jagged. And it was a relatively small, it's the size of a head, the hole in the window, slightly bigger than the size of your head. So it would have been incredibly impossible to climb through that window without smashing out the glass at the bottom of the window, without leaving fabric or blood or something on the window from cutting yourself, or leaving threads on the window as you climb through it, from leaving footmarks on the weatherboards as you climb up to get in. The other thing is that on the inside of that window, there were these curtains and drapes. Just beyond those was an old speaker, the stereo speaker that stood, 3 foot high. And that was right inside the window as well. And on top of that were some sort of little toy figures or something like that. And they were all still upright, and there was dust around them. If anyone attempted to push through that window, they're going to hit the curtains, knock the stereo speaker, and the little figures will fall, and you could see, there'd be a dust mark around that. It was pretty quickly apparent you couldn't get through that window. So the only way that, therefore, the pig's head was relevant to that is if someone had a key to go through the front door, because none of the other windows were disturbed, none of the other doors were disturbed. The other one was, as I say, locked and bolted at the back. There were 3 pit bull dogs in the backyard. Getting over the back fence, no. So police were pretty certain from the first day that it didn't look likely. But so what happened is Greg came in and said, they're throwing a pig's head, this is hours later when they've finally gone to the police station, and said that it's Kenny Penfold, it's Yvonne Penfold, it's the Penfolds. But the problem for police had at that point was Belinda's arrived with him saying, he's done it, he's hurt Jaden.
So she's blaming Greg. She's saying Greg's done it.
Yep. When they first arrive at the police station, she say, and because she's out of it as well, she's blind,
right?
And he's told her stories during the night. So when she was out at the pub, they've rung him to check on the kids, and at one stage he was talking to Kate. He said, he burned his bum and I had to take him to hospital. No, but he's all right. And it was sort of sowing this idea that something had happened to him, but they rang and got cleared up. No, he's all right. But Greg eventually picked Belinda up from the pub. She was at one stage going to stay there in the back of a panel van of another guy up there. And he's gone up to collect her. And when he's gone up to collect her, he's taken another can of Jack Daniels and Coke. And that, to me, was always really significant, that he took more drinks for her. And the reason I thought it was significant is because he wanted to keep her drunk. He wanted her to be more drunk, because my belief was accorded with what was put in the police prosecution case, was that he wanted her to wake up having been so drunk and finding Jaden. Well, initially I think he wanted her to wake up and find him dead in his bed and think, what have I done when I've been drunk? And he's arrived home, and while he was out, someone's thrown a pig's head at the window, and he's come home and found this smashed window, the pig's head there, and realised the whole story had to change.
Wow. Okay, that's your theory.
Yeah, well, so, I've probably gone about it in a convoluted way of explaining how it happened, but
No.
What I think happened is that in the afternoon, and this was sort of the version put by police, it was thoroughly sort of examined, but he's working on his car in the afternoon. Greg sort of had indicated a couple of versions that would suggest that when he was out working on the car, something's happened, the car's come off the jack or something like that, and he's broken Jaden's arm. Now, at that point, there was a choice to be made of taking him to the hospital, taking him and getting cared for, or not. And you take him to get cared for, he was fearful that he would be in trouble himself, what sort of neglect and what abuse, and he didn't. In my opinion, he drugged him to quieten him down, because this was a severe break. The arm was broken right through, and there was just tape put on it to try and splint it, which wouldn't have done anything other than cause more pain when the drugs wore off, because the bones were rubbing against one another. Yeah, so he's drugged, and then Greg's gone back to playing his Nintendo. Baby's woken up. Now, I think that my view is that what's occurred then, there were witnesses that had him drive out before midnight around to Belinda's house. People definitely had him leaving his house, definitely had him going around to Belinda's house and pulling up there. And I think that he then put Jaden in his bed in Belinda's house, back in his own bed at Belinda's house, with the intent that she would wake up the next morning and he's there. Because then what happened was he was planning to then come back, go and collect her, give her some drinks. They drop into the house, so she remembers going to the house, him saying, yeah, remember we went to the house, you were drunk, but you fell asleep. And then but you said you wanted to go home, so we had to take Jaden and take you home. So remember you picked up Jaden and we picked him up and went there. I think that was what occurred. That was what he was thinking. So I think what happened then is he gets home and he finds the pig's head there and realises this is his big out.
Yeah.
Like, this is better than his first plan. So he gathers Belinda up. He picks her up there, takes her back around to her place. She falls asleep again. He then leaves and goes around to the Penfolds. And that's when there's this 2-hour window where it's like, why didn't you report him missing? Why, when you arrive home, if all of this occurred, when Belinda was with you, why didn't you ring the police? Why didn't you immediately alert anyone if you, as you said, left him on the couch? And he said he thought it was a Penfolds, and he said he went round there to Yvonne's. Yvonne was his ex-girlfriend, and there'd been a feud between them.
Yvonne Penfold, who is Kenny Penfold's sister.
Yeah, so Kenny comes home. Kenny had been in Queensland, he'd been in and out of jail. He's a very petty criminal, but sort of one of those roguishly funny characters that turned up. And he came back and found out that, there was this boyfriend of hers and they were always playing pranks, and Greg had spray painted a pentangle on a car at one point. He'd come around to her house and, because they'd broken up, he thought that she was seeing other guys, notwithstanding the fact that he was seeing Belinda. And he's rammed her car down the driveway. He's driven in the car and his car and pushed her car all the way down the drive to the back of the drive. So Kenny thought, that's not on. He's not hurting my sister like that. And working off the pentangle thing, he thinks, we'll send a message to him, we'll throw a pig's head through his window. And most people don't have access to a pig's head, but they had a couple of pigs that they'd kept for pets to rear to then eat. And they'd recently decided to kill the pet. It was a black and white pet. They were Collingwood fans and they called it Darren Mullane after the Collingwood player. And they butchered him out in the bush. And the friend Tubby had forgotten to bring the head. They wanted to keep the head, so they brought the head back. He went back out and got the head, and the head was sitting on their veranda in a bucket of water. On this night, they decided, let's throw the pig's head. He thought that they were the ones that had thrown the pig's head and were responsible. They had thrown the pig's head. He was absolutely right to assume it was them. But I think that what he did was go around and get when he's dropped Belinda home, he's taken Jaden out of his bed, put him back in the car, in the boot.
Oh, my gosh.
Driven back to his house, grabbed up the stuff, either from Belinda's or from his own place, the exact stuff that she'd brought with him that day, in a plastic bag, grabbed a crowbar, sleeping bag, driven out to Blue Rock Dam and disposed of the body, throwing it into the lake, Blue Rock Dam.
So Jaden, you think, was deceased when he put him into Belinda's bed?
Yeah.
How did Jaden die? I'm confused about...
He died of a massive skull fracture.
Oh, my God.
And that was after having the broken arm and the drugs. So I think he's woken up from the drugs and was in severe pain, and with the screaming and crying, Greg's either lost it and thrown him against the heater potentially, and then possibly finished him or finished doing what he was doing with a crowbar. He had massive fractures to the back of the skull, at the base of the skull, and it was consistent with either a crowbar slamming the head. It was like a car accident sort of force. It's just awful. I mean, there's no pretty way of describing it. It was an awful, painful death that he died. He's first of all broken his arm, and then he's been smashed. And the thought was that I don't know what his logic was. If, and I'm working on the assumption he did it. I think he did it. It's a personal opinion, but it's also was the prosecution opinion, and eventually the coroner, after multiple attempts at a full inquest, determined not that Greg had been involved in the murder or was convicted of the murder, but he was responsible for disposing of the body, which was a strange sort of legal way of navigating that. He was pulled over by police at one point. There was an urban sort of myth that he was sopping wet and the police did nothing about it. Not true.
Is that not true?
He did have... His wallet was sopping wet. When they found it the next day, when police came to his house the next day,
right,
they found $600 under his mattress, laid out flat to dry. It was wet and it was being laid out flat to dry. His wallet was sopping wet, such that the cards and that are inside your wallet, the ink on them had all run. And so he was he was definitely wet. There's every chance, I think, that at that point when he was pulled over by the same policeman that he went into to report the missing child hours later, Farnham Molesworth, was I think Jaden was in the boot of the car at that point when he was pulled over, and he was on his way out to the dam to dispose of him.
We'd like to thank our generous patrons, including Beck Allen, Laura, Ashy Girl, Melissa, Tony Lee Christie, Natalie Ma, Emma Haves, and Annalise Kay. You can become a patron of Australian True Crime at patreon.com/AustTrueCrimePod and be the first to know who the exciting guests will be on our next live stream and how you can secure your tickets. There's a link in the show notes to this episode and on our Facebook page. Coming up, we learn the truth about Kenny Penfold and the Pig's Head Gang. But first, journalist and author of the Jaidyn Leskie murder, Michael Gleeson, takes us back to June 1997, when young mum Belinda Murphy is confronted with the worst scenario imaginable. She called her boyfriend, Greg Demazovich, several times throughout the night to check on her baby son, Jaden, whom he'd failed to deliver to her sister Katie's home as planned. Every time she spoke to him, he told her something different,